Claude Code has a whole set of slash commands, but most of them aren't things you use randomly. Each one has a natural moment in your workflow where it makes sense from the very first time you open a repo all the way through to shipping a change. Let's walk through them in that order so you can see exactly when to reach for each one. Everything starts here. The first time you open Claude Code in a new repository. Before you dive into actual work, there are a few commands that set the foundation, getting Claude oriented in your codebase, connecting any tools it'll need, and deciding how much it's allowed to do on its own. 3 commands anchor that first session. /init generates a starter claude.md file, which captures your repository's conventions so Claude doesn't have to guess at them every time. /memory lets you go back and refine that file as the project evolves. It's not a one and done step, it's something you revisit. And /permissions is where you set the guardrails. How much Claude can do on its own before it has to stop and ask, whether that's reading files, writing changes, or running commands. Notice the toggle here is set to always ask. That's the cautious default a lot of teams start with. 2 more setup moves, both about extending what Claude can reach. /MCP connects Claude to Model Context Protocol servers. Think databases, APIs, or other external tools your project depends on. It's a direct line out from Claude to whatever service you need. Subagent creation works differently. Instead of connecting outward, you're asking Claude to create smaller, nested versions of itself that can go handle a specific localized task independently. Same first session moment, 2 different kinds of leverage. Once setup is out of the way, you're actually working through a task. This is where most of your time gets spent. And it's also where you'll make small adjustments along the way, picking a strategy for the change, tuning how much reasoning power to throw at it, and keeping the conversation itself under control as it grows. 3 commands here shape how Claude approaches the work itself. /plan switches into a dedicated planning mode before you commit to a large or architecturally significant change. It's a chance to map the approach before any code gets written. /model lets you toggle the underlying AI model depending on what the task demands, moving between standard, premium, and ultra tiers. And /effort adjusts how much reasoning budget the model spends on a given prompt. More effort for a gnarly problem, less for something quick and routine. As a session runs longer, the conversation itself becomes something you have to manage. /context shows you exactly what's filling up the model's context window right now. In this example, only 7% is used, so there's plenty of room left. /compact steps in when that number gets high. It takes the conversation history, funnels it down, and replaces it with a summary block, freeing up space without losing the thread. And /btw is for those quick side questions, the ones you want answered without permanently adding them to the conversation history. Not everything has to happen one step at a time. Claude Code can delegate work outward, spinning up subagents to handle side tasks, or detaching a whole session to keep running in the background while you move on to something else. This is where you start scaling beyond a single linear conversation. Here's how that delegation actually looks. With subagents, a central agent hands off side tasks to separate subagents. In this diagram, subagent A, B, and C, so they can make progress concurrently instead of waiting in line. /tasks is how you keep track of all of that. It lists everything currently running in the background, along with anything that's already finished. You can see a mix here. Some tasks like the market analysis extraction and the competitive report are still in progress, while the sentiment analysis and the presentation draft are already marked complete. 2 commands here push parallel work even further. /background detaches your entire CLI session so it keeps running as a background agent. Your terminal is freed up immediately, and the work continues without you watching it. /batch is built for a different kind of scale. When a change spans the whole code base, it decomposes that massive change into independent units and runs each one in its own separate Git work tree, so they don't step on each other. Before any change actually goes out the door, there's a review stage. This is about verifying correctness, catching what a human reviewer might catch, and specifically checking for security issues, all before the change ships. /diff is the simple one. It shows you exactly which lines of code changed during the current session, nothing more. /code review builds on that. it checks the current diff for bugs and cleanup opportunities. And you can also point it at a specific pull request, like /code review high 1234. Add the -- fix flag, and it'll auto-apply the corrections it finds, or run it in ultra mode for a more thorough multi-agent review in the cloud. Note that /review works as an alias for the same command. /security review is a more focused pass over the same diff. Instead of looking for bugs generally, it's specifically hunting for security issues and vulnerabilities. Think exposed API keys, unsafe patterns, anything that shouldn't slip through before the change ships. Work doesn't always happen in one continuous sitting. Between sessions, you'll want to reset, revisit, branch off in a new direction, or pick up a conversation from an entirely different device. This section covers all of that session management. /clear starts you fresh on a new task. It wipes the session history but securely keeps your underlying project memory intact, so you're not starting from zero on repository context. /resume does the opposite of starting fresh. It takes you directly back into an earlier conversation, right where you left off, so you can pick up a previous thread without having to reconstruct it. /branch lets you take the current conversation and try a completely different direction without losing the original state. You can see that in the diagram where the branch splits off, but the original line keeps going. /fork takes a different approach. It copies the entire current conversation into a brand new background session, so you end up with two independent copies running in parallel instead of one conversation forking in place. These two are about moving between devices and interfaces. /teleport synchronizes an active web browser session and pulls it directly into your CLI terminal, so you're not stuck switching context by hand. /remote control goes the other way. It lets you securely continue a local session from an entirely different device, so you're not tied to the machine you started on. Last section for when things don't go smoothly, whether it's a broken installation, a bug in your own code, or a runtime issue you can't quite pin down, there's a command built for diagnosing it, and in some cases, fixing it automatically. /rewind is your undo button for an entire session. It rolls both the codebase and the conversation state back to a specific earlier checkpoint. You can see that on the timeline, jumping back to an earlier point. If you don't need a full rollback, you can also use it to just summarize part of the conversation, stepping back conceptually without touching any code. /doctor runs a setup checkup on your installation and configuration, and it can automatically fix issues it finds. The goal is a clean, healthy status like you see here. /debug is aimed at a different kind of problem. It analyzes active runtime issues, crash errors, and complex stack traces to help you track down the actual root cause instead of just the symptom. And when none of that resolves it, /feedback is your direct line to Anthropic. It instantly reports a bug or sends feedback, and it automatically attaches your session context along with it. So whoever picks it up on the other end already has what they need to help, without you having to explain the whole situation from scratch.